Hello, Charlie TCG here. Welcome back to Looking Ahead, the series where I break down the meta, what's happening in Japan, and how will it impact our one. Today, we are completely changing it. We're not looking at how the format in Japan is impacting our meta. We're looking at how our meta is actually impacting the format in Japan. Certain archetypes like Terapagos have risen into huge popularity in our regional special events and online events. We're going to see how this actually translated over to the metagame in Japan. Have certain tech cards or certain archetypes in our format actually becoming much stronger in Japan's format. Plus, we have a ton of new cards got revealed. The rest of these Sparking Surges cards got revealed. Obviously, it gets legal in Japan on Friday, so we're going to see how it's going to impact our Sparking Surge metagame as we get that set in just under a month's time. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the brand new cards got revealed. So we have a new EX, the last one is Durant EX, with an interesting ability to no shocking surprise for Durant. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may use this ability to discard the top card of your opponent's deck. This is no absolute surprise. Durant always has this discarding style effect. You can team this up with some Turos as well as Pennies, potentially get some looping effect to try and get some mill effecting. You can effectively attack with the Chi-Yu to have a sort of mill deck like Chi-Yu Durant, but honestly, I don't see this being as powerful. The attack, not so much. Shenpao enjoys Rejoice, so I'm very happy to see a new card, and it's basically Pumpkaboo and Reprint. When you play this card from your hand to your bench, you can discard a stadium card in play. Now, this is pretty good. Also pretty good in Shenpao as having a basic attacker of single prizer doing 120 damage. Notably, this actually KOs the likes of Mimikyu with a Bravery Charm, so I actually am a huge fan of this style of attack. And you get to put an energy card from this Pokemon into your hand, so actually preserving an energy. Could this be the revival of Shenpao? Not particularly, because I don't really see any stadium card. It's noticeable you can remove. Think about likes of Collapse Stadium, or maybe even the Area Zero Underdepths. But honestly, this is a really good tech card desperate to include. Now we're talking about two very controversial cards, which are making control archetypes very strong. This new Rotom with the Crash Pulse, which has a really interesting attack. When your opponent reveals their hand, discard any item and Pokemon tool cards you find there. This is incredibly strong, and I feel nearly sometimes destroys the likes of Stage 2 archetypes. Now, as a Stage 2 player, you know how devastating seeing an area is turn 1 or turn 2, removing potentially 2 or 3 of your rare candies. This is, 2 rare candies, which is absolutely devastating. Now just imagine removing the Team Evolution, the Ultra Ball, the Nest Ball, the Forest Steel Stone, potentially even your Ace Bag like Prime Catcher on your first turn when they go first. Second, which is absolutely devastating. This is a very scary control archetype. Now, I can definitely see this being played on its own sort of way around there, just removing those item cards. You can evolve your item lock sort of ability, but this is so scary, removing so many of these really key sort of supporters, making sure that Pokemon is actually really limiting what Stage 2 Pokemon can do. Now, speaking of limiting Stage 2 Pokemon, this is where Gastrodon comes into play. If this Pokemon is on your bench, Stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent have no abilities. All of a sudden, you're quick searching on the bench. Well, that can't really have effect. It has to be in the active spot if you want to use this one. Think of it like Shenpao. No Baxcalibur allowed anymore. You're never really going to have a Baxcalibur in the active spot unless you can find a way to pivot around there with multiple switching cards or your Prime Catcher. So this effectively shuts off the likes of Shenpao and Baxcalibur. Also can slow down the likes of Charizard. Charizard has to be in the active spot to use its amazing Infernal Rain ability. Similar thing likes of Pidgeot. This is very scary. Now, those are obviously very much the common sort of Stage 2 Pokemon, but also the likes of Gardevoir shuts off. So this is very scary. Could we see this actually have a really big impact in the metagame, or are we going to be really put off by that 3 retreat cost? So it could be very scary to be walled up in the active. Now, looking at other sort of destructive sort of cards, we look at Walrein. For 60 damage, during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon with 2 or fewer energy attacks can't attack. Now, think about the likes of Raging Bolt, Charizard. What do they require? They need 2 energies, so this is quite scary as a Stage 2 Pokemon. Now, these can easily get set up with likes of Irida. It's obviously 1 energy, so you don't really rely on that sort of thing. But honestly, I think this is a really interesting style of a locking style effect, forcing your opponent to actually have additional energies. Heck, if you have the Team League headquarters, plus this, Raging Bolt needs 4 energies in the active spot to actually attack, which can really slow them down. Now, obviously, the likes of Charizard, and even some decks like Charizard can go around with attaching additional energies, but it can really slow down the Raging Bolts, which is looking like it's the most dominating archetype. Still in our format, if we look at the Louisville most played day 1, as well as also in Japan Championships. If we look at the Paldean Tauros, the water one, for a double turbo, 30 damage, you may put up to 2 energy cards attached to your opponent's active Stage 2 Pokemon into their hand. There is so much Charizard hate, it's unbelievable. So effectively, this is very scary. Limiting any of the Charizards out in play, forcing them to get Churro out to evolve to put those energies back into play from an Iona, shuffling them back in. This is definitely a bit of a scary sort of effect of this one, definitely slowing down the likes of the Dragapult and Charizard. Armories and Sterilage got revealed. Obviously, Sterilage are doing pretty well right now with the Sterilage EX. Are any of these two single prize attacking options really good? Now, Armories has a really interesting attack. Discard all fire entities attached to this Pokemon and does 180 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Instantly thinking, well, this KOs this blockability, you have 3 fire energies, it's really powerful. Being like some Magma Basement, the other Armories move some energies around to this one. This effectively could see some effects around, heck, even reversal energies, so definitely something to be considerate. But this Sterilage has a really interesting first attack. Discard all special energies from each of your opponent's Pokemon, instantly shutting down the likes of Lugia in the late game. This could be absolutely incredibly strong in this Sterilage deck. Just chuck one of these in there and then discard all their special energies, remove their legacy energy, remove any of their missed energies, or any sort of important ones like lucky energy. So pretty much effectively making that Chinos can't actually get these big one-hit KOs. I really like this for Sterilage. They have attack 160 damage and they can't attack next turn. Not too strong because obviously you're playing the Sterilage EX one-hit KO, but the other attack, the Blaze Curse, could be very devastating indeed. Now, rounding up the rest of the card, we have a Victini. Victini are always this really interesting one of abilities. I instantly thought, are we seeing a return of Fliptini? Not really, but the attacks of your evolved fire Pokemon do 10 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Another way to make Sterilage can also do really well, get that uneven sort of the odd numbers it can kind of go around with. Also the as for Skeledirge EX, you obviously have the Terra one to do additional more damage, but also you could team this up with the regular Sterilage and get a big one-hit KOs it potentially needs. I think this Charizard is going to be the next sort of the ancient single prize attacking option around there. 30 damage, and if one of your ancient Pokemon uses an attack class that is 150 damage, let's do 180 damage for two basic energies. Really, really easy, and can easily one-hit KO most things in the format, especially in Regidrago. You're constantly attacking this one. This is a really good sort of niche around to go with it. Obviously, it doesn't have the likes of Sandy Sharks, which can actually do additional more damage anyway. It only needs to have 3 or more energies. This obviously has the layback of you need to use an attack from ancient Pokemon, but that can be very easily done, or even a second attack and does 110 damage. And finally, we have a new item card here, which lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order, or shuffle those cards back into the bottom of your deck. I can see this be seen some use in the likes of Miraidon. It could be also used in control, so you understand what your top deck's going to be. It's going to be pretty powerful, nevertheless, but also quite interesting. Now, let's actually look at how the meta is really shaping up in the end of the City League results before we get to the rest of the Sparking Surges. Now we can see here that Raging Bolt is back at the top with Charizard and Dragapult just closely behind it. This has been absolutely no shocking at all in the Paradise Dragona format, as well as also in the format which we've had beforehand with Terapagos. These have been definitely the strongest archetypes right now because they're absolutely so powerful. Some archetypes are actually having a huge rise right now, so likes of Lugia and Iron Thorns. Lugia, because they obviously won the won the second place at the Champions League, so obviously had a very good sort of placement right now, and Iron Thorns is a really good counter to this one, slowing down also the likes of Charizard, Gardevoirs, Palkias, or any other sort of scary evolving sort of decks which rely on abilities from rulebooks is really scary. Regidrago is definitely falling a huge number of grades. Being like the 25% at Worlds now, 5% just doing well in the City Leagues is a huge disparity. But we are seeing some of the archetypes which is performing well in our format come across. Like the Palkia Dustmole being 4%, the likes of Terapagos being 3.5%, and even Gholdengo, obviously it went getting that nearly that close to that win in Dortmund, actually translating over here, actually doing pretty well. That brand new Ace Pack, which can get multiple basic energy cards, or even just Hyper Blur as well, just being very, very aggressive. I've also noticed that Roy Moon is still dominating incredibly well over in Japan. It is very fast, very aggressive. This is an archetype that actually hasn't translated over to our format. Now, if we look at the Louisville sort of day one to meta share, we can see here that still the likes of Raging Bolt was the most played archetype, and you can still see in City Leagues that's actually translated over. But the likes of Dragapult and Palkia having the much higher percentages over in the metagame in America hasn't actually translated over into this metagame in Japan. Could this change over now? We're going to get a brand new format come around, or generally is it only much more popular in our sort of format? Dragapult is finally getting the love it deserves, especially because the format focuses more on the likes of the Dust Noir, which is obviously more popular in the likes of Japan. So actually that makes complete sense why it's actually doing so well. And even the likes of Lugia and Regidrago, Those are about 8% over in Japan. In our sort of metagame, it's seen about 6 and 9% is absolutely fair. So actually seeing that our smart format is actually impacting that. We're seeing the more popularity likes of Palkia and likes of Terapagos. I've seen they've actually quality increasing in play. Though they may not have got the results that really most decks really require to really talk about that much, I generally think it's incredibly good to see that our metagame is actually shaping how a format is really being developed in Japan. And if we just look at the top 6 archetypes here, we can see there actually has been a little bit of a shake-up. The first and second and fourth and fifth place have actually swapped places. Raging Bolt is finally back at the top, and generally I think it's one of the most dominating archetypes right now. It is so fast, so aggressive. Like so Briar has opened so many more possibilities, forcing your opponent to actually kind of think about, do they want to get to those 2 prizes left? And we've seen Dusknoir have that huge effect. So Charizard and Dragapult going in at a second and third spot. Fortunately, no Terapagos or Palkia's actually made it in here, but Terapagos and Palkia did in fact get a couple wins this weekend, so they are performing pretty well overall. Lugia is still on an absolute tear, getting 7 wins, getting that 4th spot. Likes of Gardevoir has gone down just a little bit, that's 6 spots, and Regidrago is back in at 5. We're seeing Regidrago kind of like dip in and out, similar likes of the Dragapult. The very big sort of dragon sort of archetypes are incredibly dominant right now in Japan. We can see here that 3 of the top 6 archetypes in Japan are dragon-based Pokemon. So, again, like I mentioned before, Raging Bolt doing incredibly well in our format is transition over. And like the Dragapult, obviously winning Dortmund has had a huge cascading effect in the City League Championships. And finally getting the results, which is we've been dying to see because it's been dominating Japan for so long. And now we're finally seeing, now we've actually refined the list by a Japanese player. It's actually translated properly over to Japan, and we could see this Dragapult success continue. Similar to say the likes of Regidrago as well. It's doing pretty well right now in our sort of format, and that's definitely going to be translated over, especially in the likes of Lugia. Likes of Rahul Reddy has been an absolute tear, being back-to-back top 8s, which has been insane with Lugia. Obviously doing incredibly well at the Champions League, so it makes absolutely sense why this is going on an absolute tear right now for Lugia. So we're actually seeing our format actually make an impact in Japan. The likes of Terapagos, the likes of Dragapult, the likes of Palkia actually having much more increased play than beforehand. Now let's actually look at some lists. How they're actually impacting where the new card from Paris Dragona, which we could really be thinking about going into the Sparking Surge metagame varies in a few weeks' time. So if we look at Raging Bolt, we can see here not much has really changed, but I've seen more of an increase in the likes of the Lost Vacuum. Lost Vacuum I think could be a really good out to actually going against the mirror match. Instead of like sacrificing one of your own additional energies, effectively instead of taking 4 energies to 5 energies to KO likes of Raging Bolt, you only have to do 4. I really think this is a really nice inclusion. We're still seeing likes of Sandy Shock be played, but I'm also seeing likes of Fluttermane see some increase in this one. Pretty much guaranteeing the ways for you actually to use the abilities like Serendipity, Radiant Greninja, and Ogre if you're against the likes of an Iron Thorns. We're still seeing more copies of the Superior Energy Retrieval, we're seeing more Trekking Shoes, and of course that Briar and Judge, which I think are really good inclusions right now for that destructive capability. I think Judge, especially in Raging Bolt, is much stronger than the likes of an Iona. You potentially see additional more cards in the late game, and obviously Briar in the late turn to get these big one-hit KOs with your Ogre in the late game, which I think is very, very needed. I think the Lost Vacuum is a really good inclusion, obviously helps in certain archetypes like Gardevoir, removing sort of potentially a single prize attacking option, can potentially gain an additional more prize card. I think we could see more the likes of the build which we saw in the stream this weekend. We could see more of a heavy charm, bravery charm build of Raging Bolt moving forward, and actually that could be seen translated in the metagame in Japan in a few weeks' time. This Charizard deck here is a little bit unique. Now, the reason why I've said it's a bit unique, because it's going back to the likes of the Unfair Stamp. I've noticed in popularity in Japan, this is becoming the most common ace spec it's sort of being played. Obviously, we're seeing more prime catches going around there, and Charizard, I feel like, has definitely not been performing as well as it can be. It requires too many combo pieces and can really struggle against the Palkia Greninja Dusknoir deck. There's also just regular Terapagos Dusknoir, because it can really struggle, especially in these early games. But we're seeing here that Fluttermane is another way to combat these sort of basic Pokemon in the abilities in the active spot, slowing down the likes of the Iron Thorns as a way for you to use your abilities again. We've seen the TM Devolution kind of go around here to have an answer for Dragapult, because you can really struggle against Dragapult in the early and late style games. So this is a really powerful sort of tech sort of inclusion. The rest of this one is very sort of generic, how we're seeing, not Palkia, Charizard kind of see success. And I generally feel like if we're seeing more of this Palkia Greninja sort of deck translate over to the Japan metagame, Manaphy could have a really good inclusion back again in your Charizard style archetypes. We've seen the double turbo here instead of the Mist Energy. Japan definitely been favouring the Mist Energy a lot more, protecting from the likes of Regidragos, and their Dragapults, as well as also not Iron Thorns, the Roaring Moons. But the double turbo makes sure you can attack with your Radiant Charizard much earlier, or actually add a really good retreat option as well. If we look at Dragapult here, we can see here we've gone off the likes of the Pidgeot build, but going more on the Dusknoir build. This one here, we can see we're very heavy in the the Cloak, getting a 4-4-3 line. Much thicker than we've seen before. We've seen the new Terra Orb, which I think is a really good inclusion. A guaranteed search for your Dragapult. Gone over the likes of you sacrificing certain archetypes and cards with an Ultra Ball, you can just use a Terra Ball and instantly get that Dragapult into your hand, which I'm a huge fan of. I like having the Temple of Sinnoh, slowing down any of the likes of the legacy energies, I think, is very strong, but more importantly, the mist energies as well. You can actually use Dragapult's secondary effect of its attack. I think it's very thin on the Dragapult, the Dusknoir line. We have a 2-1-1 with some more popularity at the 3-1-2 line, which I think is still absolutely fine, but they are going for that classic 2 Rotom. We're seeing that kind of go to effect in our sort of builds as well. So generally that's an effect in Japan that actually translated over to our metagame, and it's nice to see it's still going to huge effect and absolutely dominating multiple Dragapult lists. Again, not too much to really talk about for Dragapult, but that's not the only interesting Dragapult list. This one here, oh boy, it is so interesting and so unique and really kind of like creative for a Dragapult archetype. Now, we're not playing any of your areas here. It have this massive bench size because you play so many basic Pokemon. This is a really good sort of counter style deck, really focusing on that crispin sort of attacking option. What I love about this one is you have so many different attackers. You have the Kyurem as well, which has a really good item effect to really slow down the opponent's Regidragos or Dragapults in general, just trap in a basic dragon type in the action spot. You also play the Oakapon as well. Slow down the opponent's attack, whether you be attacking this one, going into a Charizard matchup, or effectively the Wellspring Oakapon. Get that additional sort of effect. Potentially take multiple prize cards that way, have a good sniping effect. You might go, how are we actually attacking this multiple times? That's why Sparkling Crystal is actually really strong. You have counter gain as well, so you have really good ways to actually reduce the attack cost of multiple of these Pokemon. I also love the Frigoraph with the additional attacking option. As you're playing a ton of basic Pokemon, you may want to have a giant bench size. That's why the likes of Latios EX to reduce all their basic Pokemon retreat costs is really strong. I definitely feel like this deck will definitely aim from the likes of an Aries or Underdepths because you have a ton of Pokemon around here. This one, but I think that you want to have the Temple of Sinnoh to actually slow down, and if you Lugia plays to actually have access to your mist energies, and also Artisan as well to actually get your Pidgeot as well. This is a very unique build of Dragapult. Could we see this actually have some success, or is this just a one-off fluke? So archetype which actually won a City League Championships. Now we're seeing this Lugia as well. Lugia is having a absolute, like I said before, an incredible moment right now, doing incredible in nearly every single format we've seen it right now. We're also seeing here we are playing the Wellspring Oakapon, as I absolutely love this as an attack option. Having a way to have them attacking your opponent's bench Pokemon is really strong. Actually potentially reusing your legacy energy, preserving it and putting it back into the deck. We're still seeing the Rats as well, playing a 2-2 line, also playing one copy of the Weird, but also one copy of the Klefki. Klefki is really strong, especially against those very cheeky Iron Thorns. You basically lose against Iron Thorns archetype, so having one Klefki is really strong, especially with multiple jet energies. You can effectively get this Klefki in the active spot very early on. One copy of Carmine, it's not really too much of a shocking option, which we've kind of like noticed this before, and you have 5 Gust options with 1 Serena and 4 copies of Boss's Orders. Definitely an absolute keep for Lugia. I think Lugia is definitely in a really good spot. That's really translated over to our meta, translated to their meta, and it's constantly going to get stronger, I feel. Gardevoir as well, I think, is also another deck which is getting really powerful. We've noticed more in our format, the Bennett deck is more the most common way to play Gardevoir. We've seen this in online tournaments, we've seen this in our sort of format right now in latest regional events, but generally the straightforward Gardevoir, I think, is a very good pick. We've seen the likes of Enhanced Hammer, which I think is also really good if you're playing Cresselia, but also if you're playing against Legacy Energies, removing the Iron Thorns, and the Iron Hands, and actually find a way to actually take 2 prize of knockouts. We're seeing more of the TM Devolutions with multiple Monkey Dories to spread around your damage counters. Here we can see here they're actually playing 3 Dance Energies instead of the usual 2. Could this be translated over to our metagame, or effectively is 3 actually the best way in case you actually get the prize then? Not too much to talk about Gardevoir. It's still nice to see this archetype kind of like still stick around. Not only 1 copy of the Bravery Charm, which is definitely a much more common sort of victor, especially if you're playing 2 copies of Monkey Dory. Obviously Professor Churro, which I absolutely love, but not playing the Rare Candy, I definitely am not the biggest fan of. I still love 1 copy of Rare Candy for Gardevoir, just so you can have that burst of effect around there. Get out of that Gardevoir if you potentially has been KO'd in the early sort of turns and not sort of waiting like 1 or 2 turns to actually set up your board again. Regidrago as well. This is going back to a very unique build. They like with Noivern, with VM Scoop Up Cyclone, with Professor Chiro. Find a way to actually make sure that you're just having that Regidrago in the actual spot with a Noivern as well, really slowing down those Raging Bolts or matchups, which I think is really strong. If we're seeing in Japan that Raging Bolt is one of the strongest archetypes right now, it's constantly winning. We're seeing it's doing well in our format as well. If it's going to be the top deck right now, the one that's constantly most people are playing, having a guaranteed counter this one could be the way forward. Now, we're seeing most of the other things, normal sort of things here. Gujarat, I feel like, is definitely slipping down from our sort of metagame, as well as also in Japan. So no real shocker to see the likes of Noivern kind of like sneak into that certain spot. But again, we're seeing here not too much dissimilarities about what our metagame is kind of going with this one. If we're focusing more on the basics of metagame, which judging from the release of these new cards, judging from how powerful the likes of Raging Bolt is, I would not be surprised if Noivern is the best way forward for this and Regidrago, and I wouldn't be surprised if it translates to our metagame very soon. Now let's look at some interesting archetypes like Terapagos. And I'm a huge fan of Terapagos. I played quite a lot of it on the Palkia build, and I've kind of like seen the power about what it's like with Noctowl, so it's also Dusknoir. But we see here it's got a really interesting partner, a 1/1 line of Darkrai V-Star. This is very similar to what we saw in Dortmund, where the Schultz brothers played a 1/1 line of Regidrago V-Star. A way features discard and top 7 cards, but also get access to any sort of key cards from your discard pile, potentially getting one of your double turbos back again, getting another Prime Catcher, or a Pokemon you might get, or Noctowl. There are so many really good options. But having the Darkrai, make sure you can get nearly any of your item cards in the discard pile, reusing those switch cards option, getting that rare candy so you can get another Dusknoir out, or potentially even just getting that Night Stretcher to guarantee a Pokemon. I am a huge fan of this Terapagos build, and we've definitely seen Terapagos translate over Japan. It was obviously seen a lot of success, but I would say it was like Andrew Mahone really playing like the total checkmate deck, which really clocked people on saying, oh, Dusknoir is the best partner of this one. We saw it kind of do certain well in the Champions League. We've seen it see some success in the City League, but now after we see it do incredibly well, it won the Lima special event. It's done really well in after metagame, and that is finally translating over Japan. So we could see the rise of Terapagos in this format. Like the Palkia as well, the Palkia Greninja and Dusknoir deck. This one here is not really focusing on the Greninja EX, but focusing more on the Palkia as another attacking option and having that a much more heavier line on the Dusknoir. One of the interesting things about this one, we obviously saw it see some success in Japan. I remember talking about this one and then seeing certain other players play it. We actually saw it go very, very well. Missing out in the asymmetrical cut in the regional in America, and obviously get Stefan Ivanov getting top 4 of it in the Dortmund regional. So we're actually seeing it do pretty well success rate, and also seeing it kind of this one here, we've seen it do well in Japan. So it's translated over into our metagame and theirs as well, respectively. Could we see this deck actually kind of get the recognition it deserves? Obviously, I did a video about it last week, so if you haven't checked out, please go watch it. It's a really, really fun one, actually comparing both different versions of Palkia deck. I'm a huge fan of the Terapagos build, but after playing a ton of the Greninja build, I think that potentially is the best way to play Palkia going forward. I'm a huge fan of this one. I think it's very fast, very aggressive, and I really am a big fan. Having a secret box is really unique instead of like not having that many gusting effects, but I think it's really good to get any of your key sort of cards you might need to acquire, especially at the Forest Hill Stone. Potentially you won't be really using the Star Portal ability, the way for you to guarantee get certain cards you might need. And finally, look at some Gholdengo, and Gholdengo is doing really well right now in Japan. It actually got like 4 wins, and I was really prepared to actually put this on sort of a list. It did incredibly well, and we've seen it place a new Gimmickle, but also that new Ace Spec, which gets one of every single basic energies from your deck. This is a good way to kind of like guarantee so it's big when it goes with Gholdengo, so sacrifice some likes of your superior energy retrieval or regular energy retrieval. What I love is it plays a 1/1 line of Dusknoir, which is very, very powerful to get additional more sniping effect. We've seen mostly playing like Darkrai's or Palkias, but having a 1/1 Dusknoir makes a lot of sense. I love the Monkey Dory to like move around some damage counters around here. I think this is a really unique build of Gholdengo. I'm really excited to see how this could be translated into our metagame. We're seeing Gholdengo have that success translated over in Japan, and I really hope it continues. And finally, I want to look at Ancient Box. Ancient Box is having an absolute moment right now. It got 5 wins this weekend, which again, I was so close to actually putting it on the graphic, being the top 6 in archetypes this week. But this one here is really strong. We're noticing a lot more in Japan. They're actually focusing more on the Great Tusk as its other secondary attacking option. I think Great Tusk is a really good attacker. Kind of milling out most of your opponent's archetype. If you think about how fast and aggressive version archetypes are, likes of Regidrago, likes of Raging Bolt, they go through the deck pretty quickly. And if these are some of the strongest decks right now, kind of guaranteeing a way to trap some in the actual spot with multiple counter catchers, because they're not really going to play that many switching cards or potentially utilize more of their energies in the early game. Just sit there and stall out your opponent. It's a really good way to actually potentially win. We've seen the likes of Petulant with the Binding Mochi as another way to attack an option, but this one doesn't play this one. I really like this one. It plays that new Ace Spectre. It's got 5 cards from your deck, which is, again, is basically the new battle compressor. It's discarding a ton of your good resources, removing potentially certain threats you might not need to have, kind of like a guaranteed way to get these big one-hit KOs in the late sort of game. Box, I would not rule it out as an archetype which is going to see much more success in the future. We've obviously had a huge moment a couple months ago in the online scene, and I feel like that translated over to the metagame in Japan. But generally, I feel like it could do really, really well right now. So, looking ahead, will we actually see the format actually develop a little bit more? Obviously, we get the brand new Sparking Surges set gets revealed on Friday. It's going to be legal for release. We'll actually break down what is actually doing well right now in the new format. And actually, will Terapagos make a bigger splash? I'm a huge fan of this archetype. Lots of people in our format is a huge fan of this one, but I want to see that actually translate in Japan. I want to get that big win. I want to get to the graphic spot. But the likes of Dragapult and Regidrago are really slowing it down, which could be really scary and devastating for Terapagos. And can anything actually really beat Regidrago? It's on an absolute tear. It's doing incredibly well and so dominant right now in the format. Can we actually see this continue moving forward in the next couple of weeks? So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below what deck do you think is going to do really well, what we've seen perform in our format, and you hope it translates over to Japan. Hope you guys have enjoyed this new sort of style of video, and I will see you guys in a couple of days for a new video. Bye for now.